Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And today I'm with Bobby Cobb. My name is Miriam Siegel, and we may be joined by Jan Hart a little bit later. Happy Easter to those of you who are celebrating, and happy Passover and happy Ramadan or whatever. Everybody's celebrating at the same time. So happy holidays, I guess, is the safest way to put it. And we on the Presence Posse today are going to be talking about presence and rejection. I've never had that happen to me, so I know nothing about it. Not. Rejection is generally defined as pushing something or someone away. Basically, simply put, pushing someone or something away. Bobby, do you want to start talking about presence and rejection, or would you like to say something about yourself first, or all in one?
Yeah, I'll go with the all in once, I guess. Happy Easter, as Miriam said, and whatever holidays you might be celebrating. I'm Bobby Cobb. I am a liberation hypnotist. I help people remove the blocks that keep them from being everything that they can be. And I'm excited about this as a topic today. The first thing that I thought of was when I started public speaking about 10 or 12 years ago. I went through a course, and the teacher who was teaching the class taught us that even on our best day, there are going to be people in the audience who just don't like what it is, whether it's the cut of our jib or, our laughing at our own humor or whatever it is. On your best day, there are going to be people that are unhappy with your presentation. And on your worst day, there are going to be people whose lives you've really impacted in a very, very profound way. So this is a timely and interesting subject. How about you,
Thank you,
Miriam?
Bobby.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm Miriam Siegel. I am a psychotherapist. I do a lot of work with expressive arts therapy, music therapy, psychodrama. I also do craniosacral treatments and EMDR and something called the Safe and Sound Protocol. There are a lot of people that don't know about that, so I'll just mention it. Safe and Sound Protocol is based on the trauma that activates the vagus nerve, and it is a protocol where sound has been adjusted to help people relax their nervous system, basically. And so it's kind of like a training, and it works surprisingly well in many ways. So I just thought I'd mention that because a lot of people don't know about it, and it's very effective, and it can be very effective, and it's not invasive. So and it's not a talk therapy necessarily. It's more of a sound therapy, but it's amazing how many people are affected by sound in connection with trauma, and they don't know it.
And if I could, how are you activating the sound? What is the? Tell us a little bit more about that, if you don't mind.
The sound has been pre-recorded and adjusted in a laboratory. So, like the extreme sounds have been canceled out. I was going to sneeze for a second, and then I didn't. So people listen to music that's been adjusted. And when reactions arise, then the music is stopped, and stabilization techniques are used to calm the nervous system down, and then the music is reintroduced. And so there are programs of music that are more activating and less activating. And once you've been through one or more of the music programs, it takes about 10 hours if you can listen continuously for 30 minutes per time. So it can take longer if you can't. Then a lot of times people, they don't even they can't understand what's happened. They just realize that they're being more social, they're not as irritable, they don't get as quickly overwhelmed,
Hmm.
and they can't believe that it's because they've been treated with this adjusted music. But it does something to the vagus nerve, this adjusted music, and it's been well researched by Dr. Stephen Porges, who has written extensively on this window of tolerance and the vagus nerve, and how the vagus nerve, the role the vagus nerve plays in traumatic reactions.
And I mean, just activating that seems to be very, very calming for almost everybody.
Yeah, it's activating and deactivating.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's very interesting. And I've had people just after one half-hour session say, "Oh yeah, and I just felt really, such a nice time with my husband afterwards," or "I went out and I did this or this and this, and it was great." And but you need to go through the whole program anyway, because it's an up and down sort of thing. But there are many people who have been helped, children, adults. So some people who have ear ringing tinnitus, for example, may experience less of it after having tried the Safe and Sound protocol. Also tension in the body. So there can be other bodily reactions, like when their system starts to release, you release tension, and so your body starts releasing toxins. So they have to go to the bathroom a bit more often during right? Which is a good sign. I mean, if it's usually painless, right? It's just the body getting rid of stuff that it's been hanging on to for a long time. So it's a very interesting program. And it can be administered physically in the same room or remotely. So I don't have to be, I can be on the other side of the world and treat you with Safe and Sound protocol. So it's very, very exciting. But that doesn't have a lot to do with rejection. It's just one of the things I do.
Yes.
Although I would feel really rejected if nobody wanted to talk to me about it afterwards. I would take it personally. And I actually am going to mention this idea of taking things personally, because one of the things I've been reading up on this topic before we're doing this talk today, and one of the things I noticed was, and I know from my own experience as well, if I think I'm being rejected by somebody, they don't have to be doing it. I can just think it. Then I can feel rejected. I can feel awful, and take what they do and say very personally. And it may be that they're just actually more, like, as an example, there was somebody who's going to come for Easter, but who got COVID and couldn't come. And the rules in Norway are, right now, they believe that people are not, sorry, I'm not used to speaking English when I'm talking about COVID. So it's usually Norwegian. So I'm looking for words. So I'm sorry if I'm stuttering a bit. What is it called when you infect somebody else? Like you're not contagious. Yeah. Sorry. In Norway, they've understood that in general, they think now with the new Omicron, you're not contagious after the first 4 days that you've been ill. And for me, what people actually can prove and what they think is the case, or even, it can be fairly proven, but not necessarily definitively proven, I would prefer to be careful. 4 days to me seems a little. So it's my own decision. If I were 20 and not 60, I may think differently, but I'm 60 and I thought, I'm on that sort of limit thing. So I would rather be careful. So I would prefer that nobody with COVID comes and stays with me, even past the 4 days. So that person who didn't get to come could have taken it personally, like, oh, well, Miriam, she doesn't want me there, right? She doesn't love me anymore. She doesn't, or something to that effect. The person can have felt really rejected, instead of it was just my own inner gut just telling me, don't do it. Just don't do it. So it's that sort of taking things personally that can really mix things up when it comes to this feeling of being rejected. I just wanted to bring that into the mix because it's really easy to take things personally for many people when it doesn't have to be the case. Like, I love this person,
Right.
wished that that person could have come, but it just felt absolutely wrong.
Yeah, and that taking it personally is that's an interesting thread to pull, because you can wonder if the feeling of feeling rejected is really telling you about your circumstances, or is it more of an inner guidance type of thing? And by that I mean, I'm struggling with words today too. Um, uh, uh, like when we feel rejected in the grand scheme of things, very often, looking back and having a little bit of time, we can just see that we were off a little bit, and we were taking things personally when there was nothing that was personally meant by whatever we perceive to be the infraction.
Mhm. For
I
some
guess.
reason, at the moment, I'm thinking of someone I know, but it doesn't have to be. It can be anybody in this situation where they're with someone. So I'm a woman, so I'll speak from a woman's point of view. I'm with a man, or actually, it doesn't, a woman's point of view can be also, I'm with a woman. In my particular case, I would have been with a man, and that man would have possibly chosen another woman. So we break up, right? And I could go through a process of, he didn't want me. He wanted her. So I wasn't pretty enough, and I wasn't good enough, and I wasn't smart enough, and I wasn't sexy enough, and I wasn't. And that's why I was rejected.
Hmm.
And all of that is something I put on myself because he has, or she, in my case, it would be he, taken a choice, chosen another person because of what he needs, not based on what a good person I am or how sexy I am or whatever. Something wasn't there, something didn't feel right. And so he went towards something else. Like, generally speaking, if I was a real jerk, then, well, there was something that wasn't right there, and I need to take responsibility for my actions. But generally speaking, if this person just decides that, no, not her, but her, I have a choice to make. I can treat myself very badly and blame myself for his choice, or I can allow him his choice and not make myself responsible, in which case I don't have to feel rejected. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, it makes total sense, and that kind of goes back to this idea of pulling on that thread when it seems like it can be a tremendous opportunity to just kind of review the way that you're perceiving the world, because if you take it personally, that can begin a very uncomfortable downward spiral, and recognizing that it's not personal in situations where it's not, that shift of perspective, I think, really is it can be transforming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This can actually can be drawn out in several different directions. I'm thinking of, like, rejection as generally defined as being pushing something or someone away. When I read that, um, I immediately began thinking of, for example, giving someone a gift or trying
Mm,
to. wanting to, doing something nice for someone, and that person does not accept the gift or turns down the gesture.
Yeah.
And then again, that choice or that interpretation that they don't want my gift, they don't want me.
and
I love that you laugh.
we because we make that leap so easily when it very often is not the case.
Yeah. It can be something um, like my boyfriend is a very generous person, very generous person. And he will sometimes, actually for a long time, he would come home with flowers.
Hmm.
He would give me flowers. And I love flowers. Flowers are beautiful. And they always are beautiful, always were beautiful. But I have a challenge, or to put it another way, and I have a challenge because I love flowers and beautiful flowers. And I have a very sensitive nose.
Hmm.
It's this size for a reason. And so my sense of smell is very good. And so one of the things I can smell is flowers dying.
Ooh.
Yeah. And it is not a good smell. You know how when you watch TV shows like detective shows, crime shows, and they're always, putting mentholatum under their nose when they're going to go see corpses or like autopsies, or they're covering they're
Right,
going through
right.
that. Okay, so that's for a human being. I'm not going to compare it because, of course, it's obviously pungent. But for me, I mean, once you've cut a flower off of its supply of food, it's starting to die. And
Mhm.
the longer it's away from the supply of nutrients, the faster it dies. Yeah. So the flowers will smell more and more. And it can be quite a sickening smell for me. And
Hmm.
so I've asked him to not buy me flowers.
Hmm.
Now he loves buying flowers. And so when it comes to presence and rejection, one of the ways we have dealt with that kind of situation where his generous heart comes into the picture and doesn't match whatever it is on my receiving end, for example. It's like, okay, I know you want me to have that, but it's actually not something that I would like.
Right.
So the intention is good. Maybe we could talk about what I would like to receive, and you can give me that instead, right? It's the being present to what's happening, what is, and then having a dialogue about that to find some sort of meeting ground where he can experience the giving and have his good intention met, and I can experience receiving
The gift.
something that is more in tune with who I am or what I
Yeah.
need or want or whatever. So the flowers, like, I love that he wants to give me flowers. I love it. And I prefer that he not do it often. And so as long as we can talk about it and be present to why that is the way it is, and it's not rejecting him or his gesture, it is just that it is actually quite sickening for me after a while to smell that, then we find another solution. And it could be anything from taking me out to dinner to watching a movie together or whatever, that is kind of like a middle ground for us. And so he could make it into a rejection thing, like, I don't want him, I don't appreciate him, I don't love him because I reject his gift of flowers or his intention. It's not that at all.
Right.
Right.
And so that kind of goes back to pulling that thread again, because if you think about
Sorry, I'm
at,
laughing at the comment.
at the that's beautiful.
Sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
Yeah, so if you're pulling on that thread, and maybe you can psychically mind read your boyfriend. Are we able to feel rejected in the moment, or is there time traveling that is normally involved with that? So, like in your boyfriend's example, is he projecting himself out into the future and imagining you rejecting the flowers might be you rejecting him, or is he going back into the past and pulling from other relationships? And I don't know. I'm actually asking that as a question. What do you think?
Yeah. I like the question. Thank you. He actually doesn't react with this feeling rejected. So fortunately, because I talk to him and explain the situation, and he hasn't. We've been together for 30 years, and he has experience enough with me to know that when I say something, it's actually the way it is, and it has nothing to do with anything else. And he can't smell flowers the way I can smell flowers, but he knows that I do hear and smell and see, which makes me sound psychotic, but it's not. I'm a sensitive, that kind of sensitive
Mm,
person. So he knows that it's not that it is what I say it is. It's that I do smell the flowers, and it's not a good smell.
mm,
Um, but to address your question, and in general, I would think if if I turn the tables to speak for myself, if I gave him flowers, if he were the one who had sensitive sense of smell, and I gave him flowers, and he said, no, thank you. And I have attached myself to those flowers. I don't think it matters whether it's time travel, future or past, although I would imagine that something in the past is bringing itself here, because why would I attach myself to the flowers in the first place? But if I've connected to those flowers that I'm giving myself to him, and when he says no, he's saying no to me.
mm,
I would imagine, like, if there's an attachment confusion in there, that's probably something that happened in the past where I've learned that behavior, that um, rejecting a gesture is the same as rejecting me. That may have been taught to me somehow from someone somewhere, and that I would agree that's time travel. Because generally speaking, my recollection of being an infant, there is no attachment to that kind of gesture. Like if I have a biscuit and I offer it to you, it's I'm offering you the biscuit and you don't want it, then you don't want it. There's no me. It's not a personal thing. It's I have a biscuit and here's a biscuit. Let's share. And you don't have to want it. If you don't want it, then you don't want it. And it's just as at face value, that's all it is. So yeah, when the question is really interesting, because I imagine there is some form of time travel in there. Because I think a lot of times we're taught, like men are taught to ask women to marry them. And then when she says no, if she says no, even if she says not yet, it's like she doesn't want me. Like there's some sort of connection to that is so personal. And again, in that kind of, I mean, when we're talking about relationships and love relationships, they can be a bit messy. But what do you think? Since you asked the question, I'm suspecting you have some thoughts around time travel and that sort of gesture.
yeah. I'm kind of coming back to that opportunity to pull on that thread. That when you notice that, which I think it's very difficult to do um, in the moment. It helps to be. It's tough when you're, if you're feeling rejected, if you're lost in the moment, if you're taking something personally, it's difficult to pull yourself up away from the scene enough to say, hey, I wonder if this is just me taking this over personally. But it seems like a good opportunity for inquiry, I guess,
Mhm.
would be a way to say it, to give you a cause for a pause, to kind of step back and say, hey, is the fact that she's not sharing her biscuit with me really about me in this moment? And it's an opportunity to dive back into the present moment. It seems to me, although I recognize that's easier said than done.
Yes, it can be. And even like dropping back into the present moment or even being present to what my experiences is in that moment. For example, if I feel as if I've been rejected, then I can say that I feel this
Mm,
and open up the space for dialogue about that. Oh, I'm
mm.
happy you said that. Let's, talk about this. And that wasn't my intention at all. And as we're talking about this, I keep getting the same sort of, where this is really important or can be very important, sex.
Tell me more.
Because and here comes naughty Bobby. Ah, I love you. Um, sex is, I think now I'm going to make a general statement and it's for the sake of discussion. But I think it can also feel real for many people. I think men will often, when they initiate sex and get a response of no,
Mm,
may have that reaction, she doesn't want me. So it's that
mm,
rejection. It's not she doesn't want sex right now, or he, if they've chosen a male partner, he doesn't want sex right now. It's he doesn't want me. And I mean, it can be the same for women, but because I'm a woman, I'm thinking of, man. So I'm just
mhm.
making that general statement. And how I have actually seen men sort of even just talking about it, just collapse physically and energetically, just talking about that kind of situation. Because sex is such a big deal. And it is very personal because it's all of me.
Right.
Yeah. So this idea of pulling on that thread as you talk about, or learning to be present and separate between what I'm imagining is happening and what is actually happening. That seems very important in a sexual relationship because there's so much that relies on trust.
Mm,
And I think once if rejection sets in as a kind of knee jerk reaction, it's like every time he or she says no, I feel rejected. So that, and I interpret that as this person doesn't love me.
right.
Really? That can really kind of, it's a strong word I'm going to use, but it's just the one that I can think of at the moment. It kind of can poison a relationship that otherwise could be a very good relationship.
And as you're saying that, I can feel myself time traveling back, thinking of um, thinking of times that I've been rejected in the way that you are talking about, and spinning that out, into the future, which means this, which means this, which means this, and it just seems like such a beautiful opportunity, if you can be present, to have a conversation, and uh, to really open things up in such a beautiful and wonderful way. um yeah.
Yeah. Do you mind if I delve into something I heard you say?
Not at all.
Okay. Because
So
I
the
heard you say, I think back, I'm time traveling. I think back to the times when I've been rejected.
yeah.
And I went, "Eh, I've been rejected. Are you
Mm.
sure you were rejected? Or was it an action, a gesture? Do you see?
Yes. And that's what I'm saying is the beautiful opportunity to have a conversation, because if I were to go back into those situations, it really never was me being rejected. It was me feeling that I was being rejected, and it was a story that I was telling myself based on conditioning or whatever.
Yeah.
Um,
The
yeah.
reason I wanted to mention it is because it isn't unusual for people in general to say, I was rejected.
Mm.
And so it was perfect that I heard you say that. I think back to when the times I've been rejected, and I thought,
Yeah.
goody. We can look at,
Yeah.
because it comes across as that I was rejected. Are you sure it was you? It was you, or was it something else? Was it a situation or a gesture, an offering, whatever? And then the minute we can start doing that, then we can start to be more authentic in the, not that overused sense of the word, but the real sort of present, authentic
Yeah.
sense of what is really going on in this moment, what is really going on in this situation right now, instead of what do I think is
Right.
happening? How am I interpreting this? And my interpretation is actually my responsibility. And that's a very interesting and important distinction. It's I'm making assumptions and I'm assuming that those assumptions are true. And then I'm acting on both of those kind of assumptions and going on from there. So I could punish my partner, tell somebody off, quit my job, all kinds of things based on the assumptions, the interpretations I'm making, and the assumption that my interpretations are true and correct without ever checking
Right.
to see whether they are or not.
Yeah. That to me is the pulling on the thread is when you have the presence to be fully present and to say, is this true? Kind of Byron Katie's, her work is asking, is it true? Can you really be sure that it's true? And just asking that second question oftentimes can pull us back and give us the perspective to say, hang on for a second. How much of this is me just spinning off in my mind and playing old programs
Yeah.
that are showing back up again.
Yeah. And then, like a meta, what I like to call meta perspective, that is not only, okay, I'm noticing that I'm interpreting this situation in this way, but also why?
Right.
What is it in me that chooses that path? Like perhaps there's some sort of unconscious gain. Like if I go into self-pity and victimhood, then I will get lots of attention from certain people.
Mm.
I can manipulate this other person, punish indirectly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think I'm winning somehow, right? I come out ahead. And which is often to sort of create some sort of illusion of balance. I feel rejected. I've been rejected kind of situation. So I'm going to balance this out by playing victim and getting tons of attention and people on my side and going, oh, this person's a jerk or whatever. And then I can feel like I'm loved again and really important and appreciated and belonged, and the other
Mm.
person made a mistake and was an idiot or whatever. Right? It's that. So there's this sort of take a step back and take another step back. Okay, why do I need that? Why do I need to do that? The first game and the second game, right? And maybe there's a third game. Let's just keep taking steps back in order to be totally present. Nothing is really going on here like that at all, and let it go.
Yeah.
I don't even have to focus on this. I don't have to make this into anything because I'm not in any danger, and
Right.
neither is my ego.
Mm.
And that can take some training,
Yeah.
and we're happy to help with that. If any of you who are watching are resonating with any of this kind of experience that we're describing and would like to ask us questions or comment, please feel free to do so, because otherwise we'll just keep yakking, because we have no problem yakking. There
Yeah.
was, go ahead.
It's and I keep thinking about like interrupting the unconscious patterns that are, if you think about rejection, if you when you feel rejected, and I think so often it doesn't have anything to do, or very little to do, with what is going on in the moment. That it is much, much more often the unconscious patterns that we've been trained into in a lot of ways, and it really feels like just such a great opportunity to. And I'm thinking about a friend of mine who is going through some really, really tough stuff right now. And um, there was a conversation that I was having with her a while back, and she apparently, I could have easily perceived, was very much rejecting me, rejecting the advice, rejecting the conversation that we were having. And I did kind of take it a little personally. And thankfully, I had a friend who was able to just say, you know, dude, cut her a break. The stuff that she's going through right now is really hard. And just that, it was an interruption of a pattern that I was running in my head. And the mere fact that the friend offered the perspective uh, shifted everything. And in that moment, I went from feeling rejected, feeling uncomfortable, feeling I wasn't enough, to suddenly like just pure compassion for her and what she was going through. And I guess kind of what I'm thinking around this whole subject is, how can we use uh, the feeling of taking something personally to interrupt our own patterns? And I don't think I have the answer to that, which is the reason that I'm doing it in a form of a question. But it just seems like an amazing opportunity to review what's going on.
Yeah.
That makes
In a way, it seems like you've answered your own question,
sense.
at least to me as I hear you, because it's when that experience arises that when I notice I'm taking something personally, that is the gift. And
Mm,
it's telling me I'm taking this personally. So I'm doing it, and I need to look at my interpretations, my actions, reactions, my assumptions, my judgments, because that's on me,
mm,
right? If I'm feeling rejected, then what's going on with me, and where does this come from? I heard you say something about I felt I wasn't enough. Something
mm,
around that came up. I'm not enough. And I was thinking, when we're children, um, was talking to a fellow quite recently who was sharing about the time when his younger brother was born, and how I mean, of course, children, they don't have the same experience that we do. They may be as wise, I mean, as clever as we are, but they don't have the life experience. So it's not always easy for children to create understanding around things that are happening. So the interpretation was, I wasn't enough,
Mm.
right? Like they needed another one, right? Because I wasn't enough. And that person carried that experience with him into adult life. And
Mm.
that experience was triggered basically every time something happened. If someone else was chosen, or if some gesture was turned down, or whatever, it was, I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. So it's that experience of rejection. I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
Without knowing consciously that started when he was about 3.
Mm.
And it had nothing to do with really anybody rejecting him, not loving him, anything
Right.
like that.
Right.
But there just was another child that came. It doesn't have to be traumatic in any, sense of the word, like obvious sense of the word, where something really horrible happened. It is the child's inability to interpret from a wider perspective, a broader perspective. So the interpretation was, if they need another one, I wasn't enough. Or they didn't want me, so they chose to have one more. And it's also not unusual when a new child comes into the family that the parents are very busy with that child. And the first child, or the older child or children, may have an experience of being neglected,
Right.
which can be interpreted as they don't want me. And that can be carried, anything that triggers that carries into later life if it's not addressed somehow. And that's not always easy, that kind of experience. It can sit, like, really be deep seated. So when I heard you say that I wasn't enough, I'm not enough, I thought that can come from something as simple as a new sibling being born, or not getting the toy I wanted for Christmas. I
Yeah.
wasn't enough, so I didn't get it. And
And
then
we are conditioned into that. I mean, you can definitely see that with a older child who, was the shining star and the apple of mama's eye, and then suddenly there's a new sibling that comes along for the ride, and you're sharing that attention all of a
yeah.
sudden.
And
Yeah.
then that rivalry comes up and all kinds of stuff happens, because there's that idea of, if I'm not good enough, then I'm left down in the cold. I mean, there can be serious abandonment issues connected to feelings of being rejected, right? So it's not necessarily all sort of innocent, childish interpretations of things, or childlike interpretations. It can be horrible, serious, potentially catastrophic experiences that have happened, and that's carried through. But the beauty of presence is that once I come to that understanding of, oh, this is actually what I feel like is when I was 3 and my little brother was born, and nobody was paying attention to me anymore. And
Mm.
I thought it was because they really didn't love me anymore, and they loved him, and that's why they had him. And then I can be present now and understand that, well, this is not that. And I can release that thread, like you've painted a picture of pulling the thread. I can
Mm.
release that thread and be free of that. It's like, this, what's happening right now, is not that. That
Right.
happened then, and it wasn't even that. They weren't rejecting me, or maybe they were. I mean, children are given up for adoption. Some children are given up for adoption because their parents don't, at least that's the picture that is painted, the parents don't want them, right? It can be that they can't handle it, they may, whatever, but the impression is the parents don't want them, and they carry that. So again, it's like, okay, but that was them then. Right now, it's because my partner is tired, and that's why he or she has said he or she doesn't want to have sex with me right now, or doesn't want the chocolates because whatever, or the flower, or whatever it is, or I didn't get the job, but maybe I wasn't the best candidate. So it's like being honest again. Okay, I feel rejected. Okay, what happened there? Okay, maybe somebody wasn't fair or honest. What can I do about that? But it may also be I actually am not qualified or was not the best qualified. So what's really going on? It could feel like that, what happened way back when, but that's not what it is.
Right. And I had a session with a client not all that long ago, a month or so ago, and we did a regression where he went back, and a lot of his stuff that was rolling around in his head was, my parents were bad and they didn't love me, and there was a lot of that stuff. But we regressed him back to about 3 or 4, and what he saw in as he was replaying that was that his parents, he was a love child from a high school couple, and they were, I think, about 17 and 16 when they got pregnant. So
Mm.
in his world, he was like re-envisioning this at the age of 3 or 4. So the parents were like 21 and 22, maybe, in his revivification. And what he saw in that moment was that his folks were scared, they were young, they didn't know anything, and just going back through that, it was that shift that we kind of mentioned earlier about going from blame and taking everything personally and seeing that things were not good enough in his mind, to suddenly seeing, oh my God, they were young and they were scared and they didn't have money, and they were worried that they were going to be out on the street. And just in that shift, he was suddenly like filled with deep compassion for the experience that they have gone through. And I kind of feel like that's the opportunity that we all have, to the degree that we can take this as a pattern interrupt and say, am I taking this over personally, and looking at things from a larger perspective. Just and seems like a huge opportunity to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. And if Fred were here, I imagine he would bring up the idea of the true self. So I'm just going to play with that a little bit
All right.
on behalf of Fred. And of course, he can correct me in the comments later on because he's not here today, couldn't come. But you and I also like Eckhart Tolle. And Eckhart, he talks about, when he talks about being from the perspective of the ego, he has a really funny lecture or two where he talks about me, it's all about me. Girls or something. It's just really cute to look at, really funny. But it's it's so there's this freedom attached to is the wrong word, but that can be experienced by remembering, as I understand Fred, the true self. Who am I really? Because it allows the perspective of the moment, which is, it's not about me. It may
Mm,
never have been. I mean, it's, as you explained with your friend, it was their situation.
right.
If it had been another situation, they may have not done what they did. But it wasn't that. It was that situation, and they did what they needed to do or could do. And he was a part of that, but it wasn't anything wrong with him. So getting from that me to, okay, but I'm not that, and this is not about that. What if it isn't about me? Like, that's a really cool question to ask, I think. trying to
Yeah.
come back to presence and seeing from, for me, well, I often talk about a moment, like presence is a moment and a moment and a moment. But a moment is not this. A moment is everything.
Right.
It's absolutely everything. And it can be way too much for our brains to handle, at least, but it's more. So when I stop focusing on me, it's about me, and they did this to me, and they didn't love me, and I was rejected, blah, blah, blah. But what else is there? What more than me? And then I'm not talking about true self, as I understand Fred. I'm talking about who I think I am. I think
Mm.
I'm the rejected person. I think I'm the not good enough person, the unlovable person. As Danielle had posted something on Facebook about being unworthy and unloved, it's like, no, what if I'm everything, just like in a moment?
Mm.
What else is there? And then it's like, oh, well, they were in the picture and they had their own challenges. And that wasn't that I wasn't worthwhile or I wasn't lovable. It's they couldn't handle it, for example. They didn't have the resources that they needed. And that's a wonderful opportunity. It's like, what if it's not about me? What if it isn't
Yeah.
me?
And I'm just hearing that shift into compassion and and into caring, and the moment that we stop thinking that this is all about me and this means something, and just get into the presence of the moment, and look at things just a little bit differently than we did. Powerful. It's a powerful shift.
Very. It can be so life-changing.
Mm.
Just, okay, slow down, hang on for a second, because right now I'm not treating the other person necessarily very well, but I'm not treating myself very well. If I'm making it all about me and I was like, oh, I'm not lovable and I was rejected and oh, the jerk and oh, I'm horrible. It's I'm beating them up, I'm beating myself up, and none of that is necessary. What if it isn't about that? What if it's not? What if it's not me and it's not them and it's a lot of other stuff?
Yeah.
So before we're getting towards the end of the hour, and I wanted to ask you because I heard you talking about regressing people.
Mm.
And I got kind of interested, and I hope you don't mind my asking. And if you feel like I'm putting you on the spot, just let me know because we can have that dialogue. I would like you, if you don't mind, to say a little bit about what you mean. Like, what do you do? You're a liberation hypnotist, and you talk about regressing people. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Uh, uh, Hypnosis, the way that I practice it, is all about being present and in the moment. And as we, I mean, we all have the ability to regress. I mean, we can relive wonderful moments that we've had in our life. We can relive terrifying moments that we, have in our life. And in the moment that we're experiencing that, we are 100% totally present and in that moment. And regression, as a hypnotic tool, is taking people back to something that happened before and allowing them the ability to both be fully associated, meaning, like my client that I mentioned, he was he was 3 or 4 or whatever age he was in that moment, and he was seeing his mom and dad interacting as they were then. And, of course, this is all just kind of taking place in his mind. But when we do that, we have the ability to go back and see things from a different perspective. And anything that a client comes that has something to do with way back when, it normally means that there is a lesson to be learned that they haven't learned yet. And going back and revivifying the experience gives them the ability to live that over again and be able to do it in a safe and insightful way. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but it is. I think it gives clients the opportunity to see things from a different perspective and to very often learn the lessons that they haven't learned yet.
Mhm.
And so,
When you regress people and they go back, like if we take the example of the person who was 3 and is experiencing the situation and seeing his parents, do they experience the pain of the situation?
it they can, and if we're going back to a situation that is going to be painful, so something traumatic, there is a way to do that where I offer the suggestion to people that you'll be able to experience this, but you'll see it as though it's a movie. So that's dissociative, and so they can watch themselves having the experience and almost kind of decide how much of it they want to re-experience again. And there's double dissociation, which is like you're watching yourself on a movie screen, and you're watching yourself watch yourself on the movie screen. So it's kind of removed. So it depends. I mean, just kind of on the how deep the client wants to be involved in that experience, and sometimes they're fully in it and experiencing it over again. I have many clients who, when I regress them back to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 years old, their language changes and their voice changes, and so it's obvious that they're very much in the moment. And other times they're kind of like doing the color commentary of here's what I'm seeing, and it's almost like they're narrating the story. So it
Yeah,
depends. Yeah.
very interesting. Thank you. I like to work from a place of empowerment. I've mentioned this before, where I have a slogan that is focus on gain, not pain,
Mm,
where it doesn't mean you don't feel any pain, but that's not what you're focusing on.
yeah.
We're focusing on where, as you talk about, it's the new learning, the new perspective, the growth from it. And there's also reminding people that what you experienced at the age of 3, for example, when you are now 40, at 3, you didn't know how to handle it. At
Right.
3, it was overwhelming. At 3, you didn't understand. But at 40, you're a completely different person.
Right.
So you may not have been able to deal with it very easily at 3, but at 40, it's not overwhelming. It
Right.
can feel sad or frightening or whatever, but you can handle that at 40, whereas at 3 you didn't have the resources.
Yeah.
And
And
that
and often, like, along that line, the 40-year-old you can go back and tell the 5 or 6 or 7-year-old you, a valuable life lesson, and realize that what seemed like a trauma in the moment was actually a gift, and it taught you a lesson. So, what is the lesson that you would like to give to that little 5-year-old you? And that can be very empowering. So, yeah,
very,
yeah.
very. We are at the end of our hour. So, do you have anything you'd like to say in conclusion, either about the topic presence and rejection, or something that you're doing right now that you'd like people to know about?
Yeah, in terms of presence and rejection, I think uh, the lesson that I'm hearing myself communicate to me is using that as an opportunity to check in with yourself, interrupt your patterns, see how you're doing, and see if it is really about you being rejected, or is it about a story that you are making up for yourself? And just pull that thread, as I've said a couple of times already. In terms of what I'm doing now, if you're interested in diving more into this, I do have a group on Facebook. It's called Our Mindful Life, and there's lots of resources and videos and really cool conversations that are going on inside of there. And how about you, Miriam? How would
Thank
people get a
you,
hold of
Bobby.
you if they wanted to do so?
I just wanted to say that it's been very interesting listening to you, and then thank you for letting me ask you tons of questions. I also have a Facebook group, and it's called Relation Revolution, and you can see my website and my email address there for those of you who would like to have a look or get in contact with me. I am and will be offering a series of courses online where we will be delving into specific topics. At the moment, there's one that's going to be starting soon about no more regret. So we'll be working on regrets. And I will be doing one on rejection, or the opposite of rejection,
Nice.
as well. There are several topics coming up. And for those of you who would like to know more about the Safe and Sound protocol and perhaps test it out, please contact me. You can contact me at this information here, or even mention it in the group. I work with also, we've been talking about ambivalences, is what I call them. It's being on the fence about something. Is it me? Isn't it me? Am I loved? Am I not loved? Am I worthy? Am I not worthy? And I love working with ambivalences, clearing up and sort of relearning and reframing a situation where it seems like one thing when it actually is most likely something else. And coming back to the essence of who I am, which is basically free energy that is always in motion and awareness. So I just thought I'd mention that.
I love that.
Thank you. I forgot to check what next week topic is. Sorry, everybody.
Next week is our open Zoom.
Yes, we are doing a live and interactive, which means anybody is welcome to join and with camera and microphone and join in the conversation and ask us questions and also share your opinions. I think it is presence and loneliness or solitude. That's what it is. Yeah. So we will be posting more information about that in our free Facebook group, The Presence Posse. So please feel free to join us. We post the Zoom link in the group a few minutes before the talk begins, and then you're more than welcome to use it to join us. Thank you very much, everyone who was with us today, who had comments or may join us later in the comments and ask us questions. We are more than happy to answer them for you. Please join us next week, as mentioned, Monday at the same time and the same place. And thank you, Bobby, for a lovely time together and a lovely conversation about a topic that can be a bit sensitive.
Indeed.
We'll see you all next time. Everyone, have a good end of holiday season. See you next week.